Be still, my soul, the Lord is on thy side. Bear
Baptist Church in
patiently.
sunny Kunsan in South Korea. And this week's question was on Psalm 127, specifically verses 4 and 5. Verses 4 and 5 say, "As arrows are in the hands of a mighty man, so are the children of the youth. Happy is the man that hath his quiver full of them. They shall not be ashamed, but they shall speak with the enemies in the gate." If you've ever read through Psalm 127, I'm sure you have. It's a pretty well-known psalm, and it's really about the Christian home, and it begins by telling us, some things about who keeps the home. The Lord does. He is the keeper of the home, and therefore, in verse 2, it's vain for you to rise up early and to sit up late and eat the bread of sorrows, for so he giveth his beloved sleep. And then when he gets into verses 3 through 5, he begins to talk about children. The question that was sent to me was specifically about verses 4 and 5, but I think I'm going to also deal with verse 3 as well, since that kind of sets the context of it. The psalm has really three main points. The first point is the point of rest in verses 1 and 2. We can rest because we know that the Lord keeps the home. If you have a Christian home, you don't have to struggle to maintain that home. God will keep that home. You just do your part. You be the man of God or the woman of God that you need to be, and God will take care of the rest. When we get into verses 3 and 4, though, we're beginning to look at some reward, all right? And then verse 5, we have the subject of rejoicing. And so that's kind of how the psalm is broken down. And so I want to reread verses 3 and 4 and then kind of, go through some issues with that. It says, "Lo, children are an heritage of the Lord, and the fruit of the womb is his reward. As arrows are in the hand of a mighty man, so are children of the youth." When I read these verses, this will impact your thinking in a lot of areas. Abortion, homeschooling, birth control, adoption. Gives you a lot to think about. It defines for us what children are, who the true owners of those children are, and what we need to be doing about it. We find out that in verse 3 that children are a heritage of the Lord. In other words, they don't belong to us. God has given them to us. What you possess in your home, if you have children, what you possess in your home doesn't belong to you. It belongs to the Lord, and he's given them to you. You don't get to do whatever you want with them. Children are his reward. And to tell you the truth, this has always baffled me because I know that, even lost people or even wicked people have children. But rather than wrestle with how it applies to everyone else, I would rather, focus on how does this apply to me? What does it mean to me? When I look at my children are both grown and gone now. My son is a lawyer in Roanoke, Virginia, and my daughter, she lives up in New Jersey, and I've got 4 grandchildren from her, and I got 2 grandchildren from my son. So I'm beyond the raising children stage. I'm still a dad, and I still tell them, I still give them advice, but it's up to them whether they're going to take it or not at this point, right? But when my children are growing up, they were never a burden to me. I know some people that talk about their kids, it's a burden to have children. I get confused when I hear people say that. People talk about their kids being a hindrance. I can't do this or I can't do that anymore. Look, it doesn't matter if you have one child or if you have 10 children. The fact is, the Bible says the same thing. Your children are not a burden. Your children are a blessing. Yes, money could be tighter. There can be demands on your time that wasn't there before. But children are God's heritage. Children are his reward. Children are given to us for us to enjoy, not to ignore, not to avoid, not to give to somebody else to raise, not to abort, certainly, but to enjoy. So parents, let me give you some advice. Enjoy your children, and take my word, the time is going to come when you're going to look back and you're going to wish that you spent more time with your kids. Now, I think that I spent a lot of time with my kids. I really do. When I look back, everywhere I went, if I wasn't working, my family was with me. We pretty much did everything together. We spent a lot of time together. My home was filled with laughter and fun, and serving God and Bible and that sort of thing. But even still, when I look back, I still say, man, I wish I would have had more time. So take time with your kids, because whether you realize it or not, what you're doing now is building memories. You're setting an example Both of my children are doing a great job with my grandchildren. I have absolutely no worries that they're raising them for the Lord. But you know what? You've got to set the example. Do a lot of things with your kids, and they'll do a lot of things with their. If you put the family first, and they will put the family first. I enjoyed my kids; they were a joy to have around. And to be honest, even to this day, my children are my best friends. When I think of those that are close, of course, my wife. That goes without saying, but my children are my best friends. I like to do things with them. I like to travel with them. I like to enjoy conversation with them. I love these things. But the psalmist, he doesn't describe children as friends. He describes them as arrows are in the hands of a mighty man. What is an arrow? What's it? Well, we know what an arrow is, but an archer, what does he do with an arrow? He takes the arrow and he lets that arrow fly. And there comes a time when we have to do the same thing. We draw the bow and we let our children fly. In fact, the only way that they can actually fulfill their God-given purpose is if you let them go. One of the implied thoughts in this section is that we as parents have been given children in order to prepare them for God's use. So that's an intentional act on our part. It's also, by the way, a parental responsibility. I don't know if you've ever noticed this, but in Deuteronomy, in chapter 6, verses 6 through 9, there's a verse that says this. It says, "And these words which I command thee this day shall be in thine heart, and thou shalt teach them diligently unto thy children, and shalt talk of them when thou sittest in thine house, and when thou walkest by the way, and when thou liest down, and when thou risest up. And thou shalt bind them for a sign upon thine hand, and they shall be as frontlets between thine eyes, and thou shalt write them upon the posts of thy house and on thy gates." So the archer, he doesn't just fire an arrow in the air and hope that it hits the target. What does he do? He aligns himself with the target. That would be, you could see that as being discerning, if you will, God's purpose for them. We as parents, we don't know the future of our children, but we can see what talents God has given them, and we can help them develop that. An archer takes a steady stance, being very careful. This is what we need to do in child raising, consistency in our training. And that's a 24/7 thing, by the way. You never let your guard down. You've always got to keep them focused on spiritual things. And then the archer aims the arrow. And parents do this with their kids. I think a lot of good parents do. They give attention to detail. They give direction to their kids, and they get them aimed so that they can hit the target, whatever that target happens to be in the will of God. And then, after all of that has been sufficiently done, then the arrow is let go. And the archer has confidence that the arrow will hit the target. There's a story about a man who just shot arrows, just shot them haphazardly into the air. And then after the arrows landed, he went over and he drew a target around the arrow. And he said, "See, I hit the target." There's some people with that kind of idea about child raising, that just wherever they land, okay, whatever happens. I don't think that's what the Lord has in mind. Children are too precious to just assume that everything is going to be okay. You have to raise your children. You have to train your children. They're like arrows in the hands of a mighty man, but you've got to be a mighty man. I know children have their own mind. I know they make up their own choices, but don't use that for an excuse. Claim the promises of God. One of the greatest promises for parents, and I think most Christian parents know this, is Proverbs 22, verse 6, where it says, "Train up a child in the way he should go. When he's old, he'll not depart from it." That doesn't mean that your kids aren't going to have a period of trying to do their own thing for a while. But what it does mean, it's a truism. And it means that, in time, they'll come back to that. And that's a very, very good promise to claim. So I guess the question for right now is, as parents, what are we doing to equip our children, our arrows, in order to hit the right target? So that's kind of a good, an exposition of verses 3 and 4. Well, what about Psalm 127, verse 5? Because it says, "Happy is the man that hath his quiver full of them, full of arrows. They shall not be ashamed, but they shall speak with the enemies in the gate." So this is the rejoicing I was talking about. There's the rejoicing was the last point. The archer who successfully and consistently hits the target is a happy archer. And the parent whose children turn out right, he's filled with joy too. As I told you, when I look at my children's lives, I am blessed. I have wonderful children, and I have no doubt that when my grandchildren grow up, I'll be able to say I have wonderful grandchildren. You know how grandparents are. Their grandkids are perfect little kids anyway. It doesn't matter what they do. That's why I'm glad children are raised by their parents and not by their grandparents, because grandparents will let them do whatever they want. My grandson, he could go out and any one of my grandkids really could, they can go out and commit bank robbery or murder and come in, and grandparents would go, oh, wasn't that sweet, and that's just grandparents. So parents are not that way, and I'm glad for that. But anyway, back on subject, the quiver. The quiver is the arrow holder. That's the thing that you put the arrows in. And so the idea there is that the archer, that is, he has his quiver full, he's fully armed, and he's ready for whatever he's going to face. Children, when they're raised correctly, they're not going to be ashamed to speak with the enemies in the gates. In other words, there's going to be a level of boldness and assurance in their life and in their beliefs. And so the idea there is that they have learned the concrete truths of right and wrong. They're fully equipped to let their lives count for something. One of my favorite commentaries is Barnes' commentary. And, before you jump on me and say, well, Barnes believed this or Barnes, look, I know none of the commentators were perfect. I understand that. But some of the ones that I could recommend, I could recommend Barnes, I could recommend Gill, I could recommend Matthew Henry. These are good commentaries. But anyway, I was reading in Barnes, and he said this about this verse. He said, they would do honor to the family and gratify the heart of the parent by their valor in defending their city and their home, or in attacking the cities of the enemies of their country. And so that's how Barnes, that was his commentary on this verse. So Psalm 127, if you are a Christian parent, this is a wonderful psalm for you. Get into it, study it, learn it, memorize it. Memorize the whole thing. It's a beautiful psalm. Store it up in your heart, and you're going to find both direction and comfort and encouragement from that psalm all at the same time. Well, I hope that's been helpful to you. We are actually teaching through the Psalms, devotionally teaching through the Psalms in our Wednesday night services here at 7:30 at the Haven. If you are in the local area on a Wednesday night, we would love to have you stop in and say hi. Tell us that you saw this video on YouTube, and that will be an encouragement to us as well. So with that, God bless you, and may you be found walking in the reality of God's presence this week. God bless you, and have a great day.